It is, Sumit ji, it is stopped.
Yeah, I am ready.
Host, can we go live?
Yeah, we are live.
Okay. नमस्ते. इस महाशिवरात्रि के पावन पर्व पर जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च इन एसोसिएशन विद रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट, मैं अनुराग देशपांडे आप सभी का इस वेबिनार में इस टॉपिक पे नेचुरल साइंसेस इन ट्रेडिशनल संस्कृत टेक्स्ट, इस वेबिनार में आप सबका सहर्ष स्वागत करता हूं। हमारे साथ हमारे मेन स्पीकर डॉक्टर N Iyengar जी उपस्थित है। मैं आपका बहुत स्वागत करता हूं सर। और रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट की तरफ से डॉक्टर भालचंद्र हरदास जी हमारे साथ है। सर, मैं आपका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं। जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च, यह संस्था गत कई वर्षों से वैदिक ज्ञान और विज्ञान के इस क्षेत्र में काम कर रही है और श्री नाथपीठ परंपरा का अधिष्ठान और स्वामी जितेंद्रनाथ जी महाराज, इनकी प्रेरणा से यह कार्य कार्यरत है। इस कार्य के बारे में जानने के लिए एक छोटे से समय में एवी के माध्यम से हम इस कार्य का परिचय करें।
भारतवर्ष यह प्राचीन काल से प्रगल्भ संस्कृति एवं तेजस्वी परंपराओं के लिए जाना जाता है। यह परंपराएं मानवीय जीवन के केवल अध्यात्म और ज्ञान को ही नहीं, बल्कि सामाजिक, सांस्कृतिक व आर्थिक पहलुओं को भी प्रकाशित करती है। इनमें महर्षि वेदव्यास जी जैसी वैदिक, आद्य शंकराचार्य जी जैसी आचार्य तथा जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ जी जैसी संत एवं पुराण दर्शनों की पौराणिक दार्शनिक परंपराएं भी दिखाई देती है। इन सनातन परंपराओं के प्रत्यक्ष स्वरूप व मूलाधार है हमारे पारंपरिक ग्रंथ साहित्य, जिनका अभ्यास व चिंतन निरंतर मानव व सृष्टि से जुड़े ज्ञान विज्ञान को उजागर करता आया है। इसी अभ्यास के द्वारा विविध समस्याओं के कालोचित समाधान व संशोधन करने हेतु सुरजी अंजनगांव की दत्तपीठ परंपरा के 18वें पीठाधीश परम पूजनीय आचार्य श्री जितेंद्रनाथ जी महाराज के मार्गदर्शन में नागपुर में जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च की स्थापना हुई। यहाँ पर सभी स्कूली छात्राओं के लिए श्री देवनाथ गुरुकुल के माध्यम से प्राचीन विद्याओं का पठन पाठन एवं परीक्षाएं ली जाती है। विद्यालयीन व महाविद्यालयीन छात्रों के लिए स्टडी सर्कल नामक उपक्रम लिया जाता है, जहां इंजीनियरिंग, मेडिकल, मैनेजमेंट, लॉ आदि विविध शिक्षा क्षेत्रों के प्राचीन संदर्भ पर मंथन व मार्गदर्शन किया जाता है। हमारे प्राचीन ज्ञान का प्रसार व प्रचार करने हेतु विविध विषयों पर कॉन्फ्रेंसेस, सेमिनार्स व एग्जीबिशंस आयोजित किए जाते हैं। यहाँ पर निरंतर चलने वाले रिसर्च को वेबिनार्स, वर्कशॉप्स व त्रैमासिक द्वारा प्रकाशित किया जाता है। इंस्टीट्यूट में इन उपक्रमों के साथ ही कवि कुलगुरु कालिदास संस्कृत विद्यापीठ रामटेक द्वारा मान्यता प्राप्त विविध अभ्यासक्रमों का अध्यापन चलता है। कुल मिलाकर मिशन फॉर डेवलपमेंट एंड डिविनिटी ट्रस्ट द्वारा स्थापित जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस व रिसर्च यह मात्र संशोधन संस्था ही नहीं, तो भारतवर्ष को विश्वगुरु बनाने वाली युवा पीढ़ी की आज की शैक्षणिक, सामाजिक, मानसिक अवस्था का अपनी प्राचीन ज्ञान, विज्ञान, संस्कृति, सदाचार के साथ समन्वय स्थापित कराने वाली एक वैशिष्ट्यपूर्ण व समर्पित कार्य व्यवस्था है। इस संस्था से जुड़ने के लिए तथा अधिक जानकारी के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट www.JSDIVSR.in को अवश्य भेंट दें। धन्यवाद।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। इस संस्था के बारे में, ये संस्था गत 10 वर्षों से इसी कार्य में कार्यरत है और इसी के साथ जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ वेद विद्यालय, जो वेद विद्यालय जिसमें जो छात्र पढ़ते हैं, ये वेदों का भी अध्ययन करते हैं और मेन स्ट्रीम एजुकेशन जिसे हम कहते हैं उसका भी पैरेलल अध्ययन इस वेद गुरुकुल में चलता है। मैं आचार्य श्रेयस जी से अनुरोध करूंगा कि वेद मंत्रों से इस कार्यक्रम को आशीर्वचन के स्वरूप में वेद मंत्र का पठन किया जाए।
श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ। देवीं वाचमजनयन्त देवाः तां विश्वरूपाः पशवो वदन्ति सा नो मन्द्रेशमूर्जन्दुहाना धेनुरुवागस्मानुपसुष्टुतैतु यद्वाग्वदन्त्यविचेतनानि राष्ट्रीदेवानान्निशसादमन्द्रा चतस्र ऊर्जन्दुदुहे पयागुंसि पस्विदस्याः परमं जगाम अनन्तामन्तादधिनिर्मिता महीम् यस्यां देवा अदधुर्भोजनानि एकाक्षरान् द्विपदागुं षट्पदाञ्च वाचं देवा उपजीवन्ति विश्वे वाचं देवा उपजीवन्ति विश्वे वाचीमा विश्वा भुवनान्यर्पिता सा नो हवञ्जुषतामिन्द्रपत्नी सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद श्रेयस जी। वेदों की गरिमा, वेदों का व्यापकत्व और वेदों में जो समाहित ये ज्ञान है, इसे उजागर करने के लिए यह संस्था कार्यरत है। और मुझे अत्यंत आनंद है कि हमारे सारे छात्र, हमारे सारे बोर्ड ऑफ मेंबर्स और विशेष पदाधिकारी सारे इस कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित है। मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं। और रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट की तरफ से प्रोफेसर निखिल दामले जी भी हमारे साथ उपस्थित है। मैं उनका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं। भगवद गीता में ज्ञानं ते अहम सविज्ञानमिदं वक्ष्याम्य शेषतः, ऐसा 7वें अध्याय में भगवान कृष्ण कहते हैं कि ज्ञान जो है ये विज्ञान के आधार पर ही समाहित होता है और विज्ञान के आधार पर ही हम जो है वो ज्ञान परंपरा से हमें प्राप्त होता है। तो इसी ज्ञान और विज्ञान के मंथन में आज का जो वेबिनार है, Natural Sciences on Traditional Sanskrit Text, we are grateful. We have with us Professor N Iyengar ji, who is the master in this particular subject. And I would like to give you a short intro of Professor N Iyengar ji. Professor N Iyengar ji is renowned for his contributions to earthquake engineering, random vibrations, mathematical modeling, dynamics, non-linear systems, and Indian knowledge systems. As a faculty at the Indian Institute of Science from 1969 till his retirement in 2005 as KSIDC Chair Professor in Civil Engineering, he has published 200 technical papers, reports, general articles, and books. Professor Iyengar is the fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, Indian Academy of Science, National Academy of Science, and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Germany. He has developed, combining Indic knowledge traditions with modern methods, a new line of study of ancient Indian heritage. His findings on comets, eclipses, earthquakes, ancient geography, effect of precession, and the pole star Dhruv in Vedic literature, concept of probability in classical music have attracted the worldwide attention. He brought out the Parashara Tantra, an Indian Sanskrit treatise on astronomy and natural sciences with text, translation, and notes in 2013. Recently, he has edited Narada Shilpam, a medieval period text on civil engineering with introduction, translation, and notes. He is currently a distinguished emeritus professor and the director of Center for Ancient History and Culture at the Jain University, Bangalore. I welcome you, sir, on this auspicious occasion on the National Science Day 2022, which is celebrated on 28th Feb to mark and recognize the contributions of the scientists towards the development of the country. We know Dr. C.V. Raman, an important discovery in the field of spectroscopy, which was later named as Raman effect, and this day is remembered in his honor. So on this auspicious occasion, I invite Professor R. N. Iyengar to give his talk on natural sciences in traditional Sanskrit text. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande, for your kind introduction. I'm happy to be here addressing your research institute on Vedic sciences. And also, I understand this program is organized in collaboration with the Ramdev Engineering College. As an engineer and a scientist, I'm happy to be with you to share some of my thoughts on the type of natural sciences that existed in this country, for which our ancient scientists, the rishis or the sages, have made original contribution. You are able to see the slides, right?
Not yet, sir.
You are not able to see the slides?
No, I think the screen share is not on.
Yeah, I put screen share. Now can you see?
Yes, now it's visible.
Okay, all right, thank you. So my talk is about natural sciences in traditional Sanskrit texts. In the next few minutes, I will briefly describe what I mean by natural sciences and what are the traditional Sanskrit texts and what do they contain on this. So natural sciences is a modern word as it is used, and you can find the definition in any book. It is something about nature which we understand through observation and also try to make some predictions or forecasting of natural phenomena. Natural phenomena may be rainfall, maybe temperature, maybe earthquakes, maybe floods, or maybe something else. So generally this is divided into two groups, namely the life sciences and the physical sciences. Life sciences, as you know, it cover biology, zoology, medical sciences, veterinary sciences, etc. Whereas the physical sciences are about physics, earth, atmosphere, ocean. Mainly, it's also going to be about astronomy. There is a large number of topics which come under these. Now, what we find is, in our ancient Sanskrit texts, if you read them carefully, either directly or indirectly, all the above topics are covered in their own way. The way that it is covered may be different from the modern approach, because the modern approach has been somewhat of exploiting or controlling nature. The modern science is about controlling nature. It understands, but it wants to control. Whereas our approach in India, the Vedic approach, has been the principle of Dyauh Pita Mata Prithivi. That is a connection between sky and the earth. Sky you may call Dyauh, which would include atmosphere and the sky, the visible sky. Prithvi is the earth, mainly the earth. So Earth is considered the mother and Devghar, the sky, is considered the father. So it is a Vedic mantra which comes in some of the Brahmanas, Dev Pita, Mata, Prithvi. So our approach has been different. This we have to bear in mind. Next, what are the traditional texts? The traditional texts start from the Veda, from the Rig Veda itself. So there are the 4 Vedas, that is their Samhitas, and also their branches. For example, the Yajurveda has 2 main divisions, the Krishna and the Shukla. But the Krishna itself has Taittiriya, Maitraniya, Kata, Kataka, etc. They are all the Samhitas. So the number of Samhitas or the Vedic Samhitas themselves will go to about 8 to 10. Now then the Brahmana texts. There again, for each Veda, you have several Brahmana texts. And then the Aranyakas, then the Upanishads. Then of course the Shrauta, that is the Kalpa text, the Shrauta Sutra text, the Grihya Sutra text, the Dharma Sutra, then the Shulba Sutra, the several Vedangas, Vyakarana, Nirukta. And all these have Parishishtas also. So the Vedic branch, Vedic corpus, so to say, would easily run for about 300, 400 books of that kind. Then, among the specifically science-oriented topics, that means the Vedic texts are general, or they concern either the Yajnas or the Vedanta, but the Samhitas are also about nature, about sky, and about describing the relationship between man and the sky. So, even the Rig Veda has numbers. These numbers are counts. For example, the Marut numbers are going to be either 7, 49, or in one place 108. Similarly, the number of Vishvedevas is going to be 3,339, which can be shown to be an eclipse periodicity number, to which I will not go in the present talk. But when you come to the specific Jyotisha texts of Parashara, Garga, Lagada, they are all traditional. Then we have the Jaina texts, they are also traditional texts, so to say, like Surya Chandra Pragnapti, Jyotish Karandaka, then the Shardula Karnavadana of the Buddhists. We have the epics, Puranas, Arthashastra, Shukraniti. We have the Ayurveda texts, large number of texts. Then we have texts on agriculture, Krishi Parashara, Kashipiya Krishi Sukti, Meghamala. This is all about rainfall. This is about agriculture. This is about, farming, and also about veterinary sciences. There are many texts on architectural engineering. Narada Shilpa, Mayamata, Manasara, Kashyapiyam, variety of texts, which run to more than about 20, 25 well-known texts. We have texts on music and dance. This is also science, because the music has come from the classical music has derived from the Samagana, Bharatanaट्य Shastra, Dattilam, Sangeeta Ratnakara, and later texts. So the texts on music, which actually discusses musicology, which is a science. I am mentioning this because, as Dr. Deshpande mentioned, Science Day is celebrated in the name of C.V. Raman. So C.V. Raman, apart from his work on Raman effect spectroscopy and other things, he worked on the acoustics of musical instruments, particularly Indian musical instrument, the mridangam and the tabla. His question was, how does the drums, the Indian drums, produce musical sounds? Whereas the African and the European drums, the British drums, which are used in the bands, they don't produce musical sounds. They just beat. So what is the difference? After all, sound known to be basically like a harmonic wave, a sine wave, but music is slightly different. So his first research in 1930 on Indian, so to say, knowledge system was on the vibration of the mridangam, the drum. Again, I will not go into that because our musicology texts discuss these things in their own way. And it is for us to further understand from modern methods, what is this science? What is this Vijnanam which is there? Then we come to the works of Siddhanta astronomers, very well known. There are at least 100 books on this. Aryabhata, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, and others. It's a very, very long list. I will not go into that. Then the above is only a glimpse of the text, whereas there are more than 1 lakh manuscripts on science subjects which are yet to be studied, which are yet to be looked into from our manuscript libraries, collect them, and we have to read them and see what it gives. This is work is yet to be done. Now, one side we have natural science, and the other side we have large number of texts in Sanskrit and also in Indian languages, no doubt. Then how do we study this? We need a method of studying it. That studying, I have divided this into 2 periods for the history of sciences, Indian sciences. One is the Common Era. Common Era starts from, you can say, 0 or 100 AD, or what we call CE nowadays, is the Common Era. AD is not so much used, but I'm using it so that for people who may not know may understand it. That is about 2000 years is the Common Era we have got. Whereas before that, that is the before Common Era, that is the BCE period. So in both the periods, we have large number of texts. But the Common Era texts are well studied because they are available, they are recent, they are only about, even though 2000 years is very long, from the point of view of Indian history, it seems to be very recent. For a 500-year-old text or a 1000-year-old text will be considered modern in comparison with the Vedic text. I will show you Parashar Tantra or Vriddhagargya Jyotisha. They are more ancient, they go to 1500 BC. And as I mentioned previously, before Common Era, starting with the various Vedic period, the Shulva Sutras become the more important text, because they give on geometry, computation, layout of burnt brick altars, burning bricks, building altars. So Shilpa, geometry, mathematics, astronomy, they all started long before, during the Vedic period. That is before the Common Era. Now, the Jyotisha texts are mainly observational and less mathematical. This I'm mentioning because the Siddhanta astronomy, say Aryabhata, Brahmagupta, Bhaskara, Siddhanta, Tattva Viveka, they all are mathematical. Whereas the previous, before Common Era texts, that is Parashara and Vriddhagarga, they are observation. So the well-known texts I have listed here, and also the Lagadas, Archa and Yajusha Jyotisha, that is popularly called nowadays Vedanga Jyotisha. It is, but Parashara Tantra and Gargiya Jyotisha are the original Vedanga Jyotisha. I will show you why and how. Now, the Surya Chandra Prajnapti, which is in Ardhamagadi Prakrit of the Jains, which gives information which goes up to 500, 600 BC. That is, before the historic period of Buddha and Mahavira, That's also an important before Common Era text. Now, there are problems when you go to ancient texts of this era. Parashara Tantra, the original manuscript is not available. It is known only by quotations by later authors. But even the quotations which they have quoted, they are fantastic and they contain tremendous amount of original information on ancient natural sciences. That's what I want to present. The second text is about the Vriddhagargya Jyotisha, also called the Vriddhagarga Samhita. This is also quoted as an ancient text by many. Fortunately, manuscripts are available for this, which claim to be Vriddhagargya Jyotisha, even though they were written up maybe in the last 500 years, because the manuscript tradition and the oral tradition are the strong traditions of cultural transformation, cultural transmission in our country. Originally, it was all oral, the Shruti, for nearly 2,000 to 3,000 years or so. Then the script started. Then, based on the script, whether it was Brahmi, whether it was Devanagari, Nandinagari, Grantha, or other scripts, they were written on palm leaf or on Burjapatra, particularly in Kashmir, in the Sharada Lipi. But they were all, perishable, so they had to be rewritten every 200 or 300 years, which has come down up to almost the 19th century. That method has been followed. But due to copying mistakes and by the copies, there have been errors here and there. So one will have to go through all of this and sift them. That is called the critical edition or the critical studies. Unfortunately, the ancient texts, the before common era texts, Parashar Tantra and Vrindagargya Jyotisha, and also the Surya Prajnapti, have been more or less ignored by our scholars and historians, unfortunately. Only they have looked into, to some extent, the Lagada's Vedanga Jyotisha, and there is a lot of controversy on that also. Now, why study Sanskrit texts for scientific information? Already Dr. Deshpande has mentioned, and also in the initial introduction of your institute, it has already been stated. But from a modern, a student point of view, because there are engineers among you, past history of natural phenomena, earthquakes, floods, and droughts, they help us in understanding the future risk of the society to extreme climatic conditions. For example, people who work in seismic hazard or use the earthquake map of India or the Bureau of Indian Standards Code, they know there are seismic hazard maps which will tell you in the next 100 years, next 1,000 years, what type of earthquake may be expected. Not that it's a prediction, but to make our buildings, our nuclear power plants, and our dams to be safe for the next, let us say, 1,000 years or so, then what kind of forces we have to consider? That would depend on what happened in the last 1,000 years, or last 2,000 years, or last 10,000 years. This is how all over the world natural phenomena are handled. The same thing about floods and droughts. People would be knowing, irrigation people, that the reservoirs are designed for 100-year, 1,000-year, 10,000-year floods. Well, because the weir strength or the weir height has to be decided based on these things. So history of science is a modern topic, at least in India. But that needs to be pursued, particularly prevent wrong representation of the achievements of Indic civilization in comparison with other cultures. Come to this towards the end once again. Unfortunately, only recently there is awareness of this importance of studying history of science in India, what has been developed among educationists, historians, policymakers, and scientists. Now, Siddhanta astronomy, which originated after 100 CE, have been studied very well, both in India and abroad. But there is one important issue, that there is a strong tendency to falsely attribute many original Indic ideas and contributions to foreign sources. They would say that this has come from Babylonian, this concept is Greek, things of that kind. But if it is really so, we may agree to it, but if it is not, why should we agree? And this is nothing about glorification or shamanism, but we have to understand our history properly. This was one of the concepts that pushed me into this work. Now, I should say a little bit about my motivation also. This started first after an earthquake in Maharashtra, actually. That is the Killa earthquake in 1993, 30th September. So to find out the seismic hazard of South India, I have to look into the past earthquakes. And the only text available was Brihad Samhita of Varuna Earthquakes, who was in the 6th century. But when I went through the Brihad Samhita, and you will also notice if you go through the text, that Varuna, for all the excellent work that he has presented, is an encyclopedic collection. He quotes Parashara, Vruddha Garga, Kashyapa, Asita, Devala, and several others. So they are all before his time. Now, Parashara attracted my attention because there is mention of a text called Parashara Tantra by Varahmihira in his Buddhachara, that is the movement of Mercury. And this has been commented on by Bhattotpala in the 10th century, the whole text of Brihad Samhita. And he keeps on quoting Parashara one after another, almost every page there are prose texts of Parashara. So it was clear that Parashara was older than Brihad Samhita, and roughly from the consideration of what Utpala has said, the winter solstice during the Parashara's time was not the same as what happened in Brihad Samhita time, but it was more towards 1400 BC, 1500 BC kind of thing. So this made me get interested in Parashara Tantra, and I collected all the information and brought out a book called Parashara Tantra. And one can show that. I will show a brief result later, because I don't want to go into all the details. This belongs to the 14th to 12th century BCE. That means already about 2000 years before Brihad Samhita. Please understand this. Already 2000 years before, or maybe 1500 to 2000 years before Varahmihira. And this information had been carried on maybe in writing or maybe orally. And Varahmihira knew this, something about Parashara, and he wrote it. But surprisingly, in the 10th century in Kashmir, Utpala was having a copy of the Parashara Tantra because he quotes the versions as it is. But unfortunately, after that, we are unable to locate a manuscript of that. Maybe it is lost, or maybe it is somewhere hiding in one of the libraries. In any case, instead of delaying the work of collecting the manuscripts, I decided whatever is available, we will collect it and publish it as a book, so that engineers and scientists who are interested in natural sciences and astronomy in ancient India will have the advantage of going through this book. Because this book, the contents are very interesting. It's about sun, moon, of course, about eclipses and all the planets. And it also has a long chapter on comets. See, as you know, the Siddhantic astronomers never wrote anything on comets. The comets would have been there during their time also, that we know very well. And this was the first text to give the condition for the rise of a star called Agastya. Agastya, of course, the Vedic people know very well. It is the southern star called in modern times Canopus. But when does Agastya rise? When does Agastya set? That had to be known in advance. Otherwise, only after rising, it would have been known. Parashara gives the condition on it, which is very good. And I have discussed it in great detail because it is about archaeoastronomy, but I can't go into all those details. But that also belongs to about 1300 BC, when the Hasta Nakshatra was rising in the east in the early morning. Canopus, that is Agastya, would rise in the south. That is the statement. That would happen in the Sharad Ritu. That is today somewhere August, September, so to say, after the Varsha Kala or the rainy season, Agastya would be rising. That broadly Agastya rises in the Sharad Ritu is mentioned even in the Vedic period. But which day? What is the connection in the sky? Parashara worked out. That is an observational result. It also has several other chapters on occultation of stars. Occultation of stars by moon and other planets he discusses, and on rainfall, pravarshanam, and also on bhukampanam, on earthquakes. And there is also something on veterinary sciences and on vrikshas, and several other things on sleep, and on a little bit on psychology also in this book. But since the original manuscript is not available, I have given only the quotations in this book. Now, if we go further, the planetary things are mentioned verbally. For example, this is the movement of Angaraka or Mars, which is given names. There are 5 types of Vakragati, he says, but he doesn't say the periodicity and other things. But that means I'm showing below here a snap taken from the NASA website. It's a very recent one, 2011 or so. The movement of Mars, how when you see from the Earth, it moves in a retrograde motion. There are 2 types of retrograde loop. One which is not intersecting, one which is intersecting like this. Both were known because he gives the name Vyala for this. And this intersecting one is called a Mushala. Mushala is going to be something like a pestle or a long knife which is carried, So that is the shape which one gets. But if you have to see the shape, it is not continuous. You have to observe at least for about 6 to 9 months the sky. Then only you will understand that the planet has moved in the stars in this shape. And there are no figures. It would have been remembered, or maybe they drew something on the ground, and then they compared this Vakragati and they called it Vyala. Now, these are some of the interesting things which comes in Parashara Tantra. He also gives the 7 ways of Mercury. Mercury is a very difficult star to observe, but he says Mercury rises, Mercury is seen in 7 paths. What are the 7 paths? Nobody has been able to so far, even though Varahamihira quoted this, and he says Parashara Tantre Nakshatrahi Kirtita Gatayaha. So he quotes Parashara Tantra, how many days it visible in each of the 7 paths. But as a Siddhantic astronomer, he and Utpala didn't bother about this, and they think that this may not be correct. But from modern approach, if you see, I'm just showing a figure of visibility paths of Mercury in 1 year. You can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4 in the east visibility. 1, 2, 3. That is 4 plus 3, 7 visibility paths. 4 in the morning, 3 in the evening, when it can be seen. That is in the evening means the western side, morning means on the eastern sky. So per year there are about 7 positions or 7 places, or what Parashara calls 7 margas, where Buddha could be seen in the night. So this is a real observation, and the numbers are also reasonably correct. We cannot ignore them. So also for Venus, is more complex, so I will not go into that. But the period given, the synodic period he states, is reasonably correct. The modern period is about 584 days. He gets about 588 to 592 days is what Parashara has given. So that's also correct. So for Jupiter, Saturn, that is Shaneshchara, which are the outer planets, there the sidereal periods are given. That means it has to come to the same nakshatra. This is not the modern sidereal period, but from one nakshatra, from a visible nakshatra, it has to come to the same nakshatra. How much time is taken, which is reasonably correct for both. The important or the very impressive thing is about Ketuchara and comets. He says there are 101 comets, and these 101 comets, he names them, and also he says 26 were visible. That is for the people who observed, that is for his ancients. So if Varahamihira lived in 1400 BCE, then 26 comets, a list is available, was available with him with particular periods, that is particular intervals between two comets. So he gives that also. For example, let me digress. The modern time, we know that the Halley comet comes back after about 78 to 80 years. And Halley comet has been traced up to about 300 BCE by modern astronomers, taking its visibility from some Greek records and also from some Babylonian information and also Chinese records. And the 26 comets which Parashara and later on I will show Vruddhigarga mentioned has not been investigated at all in greater detail. And you'll see that here I am showing only one comet which is called Paitamaha Chalaketu. Panchadasha Varsha Shatam Proshya Udita. Panchadasha Varsha Shatam is not 1500. In modern times, it would be translated as 1500. But Adbhuta Sagara Ballala Sena clearly says these are additive words. There are many such additive words in the Upanishads and in the Vedas, and in the Vyakhyana of the Upanishads, in Chandogya Upanishad and others, both the Bhashyakaras have said this is additional, it is Panchadasha Shatam. This you have to add, that will be 115 years. After the previous comet, this Paitamaha, who is called the Paitama, is the son of Pitamaha Brahma, called Chalaketu. What does he do? See, he Paschimena Anguli Parva Matram Dakshinabhinatam Krutva Kaliketos Charante Nabastripagam Anucharan. It can be seen for 1/3 of the sky, that's about 60 degrees. And then it goes to the north, Uttarena Vrajati, Shulagrakaram Shikham Darshayan. So the Shula would be with a trident, 3 heads. It shows and it touches Brahma Nakshatram, Dhruvam, Brahma Rashim, Saptarshin. Touches the Saptarshis, Dhruva, the pole star. Then it turns to the south and then it goes out, it sets. That's what it says. And what are the portents? What happens because of that? That is given. Now, this is a whole chapter. It is too long, very interesting, but I will not go into the details. Collected a table here, and if somebody is interested, it can be seen in my book also and in my publications. There are 26 comets have been listed, and with their interval from when it started. It says it started from the Samplava. Samplava is the flood, the first flood. The first flood, as some of you would be knowing, it is discussed in the Shatapatha Brahmana, at least it is available there, as the Matsyavatar. That is when the Vogha, as it is called, happened. And, later on in the Purana, Vishnu took the form of fish and he drew the boat to the Navaprabramsha somewhere in the Himalayas. This is corresponding to the legend of Noah's Ark in Christian legends. Maybe there was a time when the whole earth had felt this kind of flood. It's a very severe flood. Or maybe the Mid-Eastern flood legend has gone from India, or maybe somewhere something has happened. But here, the dates are available. This is a long count. I don't know why historians have ignored this, because we can establish the period of Parashara, an era of about 100 to 200 years. And the first flood is also now dated more or less. The Western, if you see the earth scientists, particularly in the NASA, people who are working, they call this the biblical flood, which goes to about 3000 BC. Here also it is same thing of that kind. The 26 comets, they add up to about 1400 years. So it takes our history back, the first flood, to about 2800 BC. So this should not be ignored. And one of the comets, which is discussed here, has 3 heads. Very clearly it is mentioned, it has 3 heads. And I am always amused and intrigued because there is one seal which is available, the Harappan seal, which I am showing here, which has 3 heads, an animal with 3 heads. As we know, no animal with 3 heads is possible. But this might have been an indication of a celestial object. And there is a mantra in Yajurveda, Vishwarupa vai Tvashtraha tasya trini shirshani. So he had 3 heads and he did so many things. Not going to the legend of Indra cuts his head and it falls down on earth. So there would be an impact and all that. Could this be a representation of this Chalaketu with 3 heads? Maybe the Trishira of the Yajurveda Samhita, because this object, because this is available as a physical object, there are many such 3-headed seals available in Dholavira, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and many other places in Gujarat and the Indus Valley or the Indus Saraswati region. They have been dated to roughly 2700 BC by carbon C14 dating. So there is a synchrony in these things, but this will have to be investigated scientifically further. There is also about rainfall. Some of you may be know that Varaha discusses rainfall and he gives a chapter on rainfall. I was under the impression that what Varahamihira given was the original, applying possibly measured around Ujjayan. But I was wrong. In fact, this book on Parashara Tantra I published in 2013, but I had worked on Brihat Samhita in long back in 97, it published in Current Science 97, I took the values what Varahamihira gives and then did a statistical analysis and found out a histogram. And this is the kind of histogram which comes for the numbers given in by Parashara, in the Brihat Samhita. Found out the mean value and the standard deviation. And then actual data I took from Ujjain, Indore, Guna, Dhar, and Jaipur. Actual 100-year data, 80-year data actually, obtained from the IMD and collected this information to find out what may be the histogram, what is the statistics of rainfall. So I'm sorry, I published in 2004, whereas Tantra book was published in 2013. So I found that the coefficient of variability is same, nearly same, whatever is given in Varahamihira's book and whatever we observe today. But the average value, because we don't know the measuring part or the measurement details, so I cannot say what was the average value. But there is a reasonable understanding. They measure because even in Shastra of Kautilya, there are measuring numbers are given, and also the size of the pot with which the measured rainfall is also mentioned. This is quite realistic. But I was surprised to find the same statement in Parashara. Utpala says these are all by Parashara and not original to Varahamihira. And also in Adbhuta Sagara also this is quoted. Adbhuta Sagara is a book of 12th century. There also it is quoted as by Parashara. So, I was these factors which convinced me that there are some great science in this country long before the Common Era. That is before you can say generally the Alexander's incursion into India was about 300 BC. That is before the Chandragupta Maurya and that period. And we know that roughly the Harappan cities, there was a kind of a decline from about 1500 BC, and 1500 BC to 500 BC for about 1000 years. We don't know the history and other details very clearly. That is, the city civilization was the first one in the Indus Valley, Indus Saraswati side. Next, it was in the Ganga Valley, that is with the Magadha Empire So there is a hiatus of about 800 years to 1000 years. So if we take care of that, we can understand there should have been some great science, and that has been recorded in our traditional Sanskrit texts. And my personal interest was with the earthquakes. So studied Parashara and found out he divides the country into 4. This is only about India. He doesn't say anything about other countries. Only the bordering countries, they talk about China, Sri Lanka, that is Simhala. Then about, certainly about the present day Northwest India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sindh, Baluchistan, and these regions are also in the greater India. So he discusses the Varuna earthquakes are the strongest, then in the increasing order, Vayu, Agni, Indra, Varuna, and I marked them where they are all felt. The red ones are the severe earthquakes, which he says have been felt in the more ancient period, or they can be felt. So I gave 4 different colors, and this reasonably matches with the modern zoning map. I will not go into those details. The engineers who are interested, they may themselves do it. So there is definitely an empirical science, an observational science, observation and then recording. And he also gives the distance up to which the earthquakes were felt. And they also match with the modern kind of results. Now, next I go to the Vridagargya Jyotisha. So, Vridagargya Jyotisha, as I said, I will take another 10 minutes and conclude this. Vridagargya Jyotisha is also quoted by later people, but fortunately, we have manuscripts for this. Vridagargya is quoted or is said in Mahabharata. See, there is a famous shloka, Yatra Gargena Vrdena Tapasa Bhavitatmana Kala Jnana Gatischaiva Jyotishancha Vyatikramaha Chatushyashtanga Madat Kala Jnanam Amadbhatam Saraswatya State Tushto Mano Yajnana Pandava. Quoting 2 sentences which are unconnected anyway, not in the same parva, given the details anyway there. So, says Vridagarga was famous as a person who knew about Vyatikrama, Jyotisham Vyatikrama, that's the anomalies of the planets and the comets. And he was living in the Saraswati river bank. So that again takes us back to the concept of Saraswati river and Indus. So we collected the available manuscripts. The manuscripts are like this, which I am showing here. About 17 to 20 manuscripts are available, which are in the name of Garga, Gargya, Gargiya, Vridagarga Samhita, or also other names. One from Nepal, it turned out to be not on Jyotisha directly, but on Vastu and on mainly Vastu Vidya. And there is one here which is from Chandigarh, which is in Malayalam script, and this is again on mathematical astronomy. So, and one is in Bengali script from Paris, written on paper. So there are also other texts in Sharada script and others. Mainly we collected several of them at CAHC. In the last about 6 to 7 years we have been working. Now just showing the details here from where we have collected this. And what does this do? The way that we are working, because the manuscripts are available, we want to publish them. So we are collecting, reading, going through them, critically editing them with the footnotes of various readings which are available in different manuscripts, and then cleaning up the manuscript so that people who don't have all the background available, they may directly read and understand. And we have been publishing this also with a summary in English. What this manuscript contains is the following. There are, as I said, the Mahabharata says there are 64 angas in the Garga Samhita, the Garga Jyotisha. Our text contains essentially 62. Maybe the 2 are missing, or maybe 2 chapters. If we add, it becomes 64. The angas are sections, but the chapters are different. There are 164 chapters, so to say, because each anga, some of them contains 4, some of them contain 8 chapters and even 10 chapters. Some of them have only 1 chapter also. What this contains I mean, just showing here. There is a content available in the second chapter, which gives what should be the content of the text. But what we have in the manuscripts is slightly different. That means some people might have added extra chapters in later periods. So this is something which we have to live with, we have to understand. But anyway, we are going through this, and our hope was whatever is there, we will study them and try to bring out critically. And from principles of archaeoastronomy, if we can date, and then we will know something about culture of ancient India also. The reason is the Nakshatras today, we think they are 27. Yes, Nakshatras are 27 as a count, but the stars within the Nakshatras are actually totally 83. And this has been more or less forgotten. People think the bright stars, as it happened in the Siddhantic period, they take one of them as the particular nakshatra. That is not correct. The ancient period, the rishis had it in a different way because they did not have the orbital astronomy. They had only the observational astronomy point. A very interesting thing that I want to draw your attention is that Kritika Nakshatra, while discussing what can be done in the Kritika Nakshatra and what is its character, he says that is Kanyopanayanam Kuryat. So if girls have to be given the Janevo, the Yajnopavitam, it should be done in a Kritika Nakshatra. That is what it says. And this Kanyopanayanam is more or less forgotten nowadays. And nobody takes it so seriously. But in some of the Dharma Sutras, it is mentioned that in the ancient times, in the Purakalpa, it was done. Nowadays, only the Vivaha is the Kanyopanayanam like that. But there are differences of opinion because we know that in ancient period, there were Brahmavadinis and there were Upadhyaya and there are also Acharya. Not Acharyani and Upadhyayini, who were the wife of the teachers, but there were original lady teachers also. They are mentioned in Panini and in Mahabhashya and other places. And this says because the Vedic learning was possible only after the Brahmopadesha. And how it was done was the question. So this text says Kanyopanayanam was possible and it was being done. This period, you can date it to before 500 BC actually. Now, I will skip these things. There is a very ancient part in this manuscript, which is in prose. I want to say that Parashara's text is essentially in prose. Now, the Vriddhagarga text, which is available, contains about 20%, 25% prose, and the 75%, which is in mainly Anushtup verse. Nevertheless, the prose portion, we can know that it is more ancient than the things which are in the verses. Sometimes the prose part is written in verse form. In other words, maybe to remember or to teach the students, they converted the same prose into verse. But the prose text reads like a Brahmana text, that is the ancient Vedic text. And that is a very important subject of Vedanta Jyotisha. Because Vedanta Jyotisha cannot be limited only to Lagada's calendar text. Now, what we did was the following. We collected the information which is available in Vriddhagarga Jyotisha about all the stars. As I showed in this diagram, if I say Kritika, there are 7 stars. And he also gives the shape of the star, a shape of the nakshatra, I should say, or of the asterism. It looks like cleaver. Kritika itself means what you may call a knife. And Rohini has 5 stars. It looks like a Shakata. Shakata is a cart. The Vedic Soma cart was triangular. Let us remember that. And this is a triangular cart. Like this, details are given, what I call the Astrograph. That means to identify the nakshatra group, which is more than 1, 3, 4, 5. So, for example, Ashlesha is given as a serpent head. So this is like the hood of a serpent. So similarly, Magha is like a room. This is a Koshtagara is like a room. The 6 stars are like a room, an enclosure. So like this, these are described both by Vriddhagarga as well as by Parashara. So we could construct these nakshatras for the ancient period, which are more or less matches about 25% with the modern understanding of Kritika, Rohini and others. But the 83 stars, we wanted to identify with modern names. The reason is, the modern catalog is the International Astronomical Union catalog is very good. It gives the modern longitude, latitude and all that. And because of the precision of equinoxes, the position of the seasons have changed 3,000 years or so. Fortunately, we have two chapters. One is called the Aditya Chara, that is in which season, in which rising nakshatra you can see, or the other way around, I have to say, sun would be with which nakshatra he would be there. And for each Ritu, there are 4.5 nakshatras, which are given both by Parashara and Vriddhagarga, and both are same. This is called the Aditya Chara. Here it is mentioning here, Shravishtar the Nichatwari, Paushnardancha Divakaraha, Vardhayan Sarasastiktam Masav Tapiti Shaishiri. So in the Shishira Ritu, Masav 2 months, he is going to be in Shravishtadi, and then 4.5 nakshatra up to Paushnarda. Paushna is going to be Revati, half of Revati. Like this,
sorry to intervene,
all
sir.
the 6 Ritus.
Sorry to intervene.
Sorry?
Yeah, your slide has been stuck on Bhukampanam only.
You want me to stop?
No, the slide has been stopped on Bhukampanam. It has been stuck.
You are not able to see?
Yeah, we are only able to see one slide, that Bhukampanam. It is not going forward, I think.
Oh my God, I don't know what happened. I will have to stop share and go back.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, I'm very sorry about that. Why it happened? You can't see any of this?
No. Yeah, now it is changing.
A Bhukampanam we are seeing.
Yeah. Manuscripts. And now
No,
Bhukampanam.
next I went to Vriddhagarga Jyotisha.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it is okay now. Thank you.
It is the introduction I gave, and the Mahabharata shloka I have quoted. Can you see that or not?
Yes, now it is visible.
Gargena Vriddhena Tapasa Bhavitatmana.
It is visible now, sir.
Visible?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the manuscripts, are they visible?
Yes, they are.
Okay. These are the Vriddhagarga manuscripts. As I said, for Parashar Tantra, no manuscripts. Whereas for Vriddhagarga, we have large number. Oh, you are able to see this. Okay. Now, this is the list of that. I mean, it's the same thing which we have collected. Anyway, if somebody is interested, the details can be given with the different scripts and all that. This you are able to see what we have published so far.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is the Vriddhagarga Jyotisham published in a journal called the Tattva Deepa. Out of the 164 chapters, we have published so far only 5. I'm just showing one slide of how we are doing the work. Giving the Sanskrit text, below the Patantaras, then of course the brief summary in English. You can stop me in the middle, Dr. Deshpande, if you have any questions. Then the contents of the Vriddhagarga Jyotisha I have listed in this. The 64 angas, actually 24 anga and 38 upanga. So 2 angas are missing. That's what I said. They may be missing, or they may be with some 2 chapters are called angas. But the number of chapters is about 164, and the number of verses will be about 6,000, including the prose part, but 6,000 verses. To give an idea, it is 1/4 of Ramayana. Ramayana has 24,000 verses, This is about 6,000 verses. Now, I was mentioning about one particular thing about Kanyopanayana. That comes up in a chapter called Nakshatra Karma Guna, when the girls should be given the Brahmopadesha, that is the sacred thread ceremony, the Yajnopavita, that is the Kanyopanayana. That should be done in the Kritika Nakshatra is what it says. And I refer to the Dharma Shastras where they say in a long time back in the Purakalpa it was possible, not in the Kali Yuga. That's what it says, some of the Dharma Sutras. Then I skipped this because it's too detailed and time is getting late. And you have to tell me, Dr. Deshpande, when I have to stop. If the time is over, I will go to my conclusions.
No, sir, please, you can continue.
I will continue. Okay. This was the graph I showed of the 83 stars which make up the 27 nakshatras, which we are calling the nakshatra mala. I was mentioning that the shapes are given. You have to understand this. There is a kind of a mispublicity given that the Hindus did not know the Mriga Chakra. Mriga Chakra means the Greek zodiac, which is in terms of Mesha, Vrishabha kind of thing with the animal figures. But we had something much better. That's only 12 divisions. We had 27 divisions. For each one of them, if they were looking like a Mriga, it was mentioned. Say, for example, Rohini was like a Shakata. Mrigashira was like a Mriga only. That's why it was called Mrigashira, head of a Mriga. And Sarpa was the Ashlesha. It is the head of snake. That was Ashlesha. These were very clearly discussed and described. Still, because we might have forgotten some part of it, the identifying the nakshatra. That was our trouble. And we wanted to identify the nakshatras as clearly as possible in terms of their modern names. We have published this. The paper is published in the Indian Journal of History of Science, co-published by Springer and Nature very recently. And we can send the details to whoever wants to go through the details. So the modern nakshatras, the reason was we wanted to do archaeoastronomy on this. That is what I was mentioning. The season stars, which star rises in which season, and each season contains 4.5 nakshatra. So the sun would move in these 4.5 nakshatras is what he said. And the year is 366 days long, and 6 Ritu would be each of 61 days. So they counted, the calendar was from the winter solstice, when that is the, today it is December 21st or 22nd, that is the civil day. From that day, they started counting, not from the equinox as it is done in the Panchangas nowadays. That was the Siddhantic astronomy thing. That is why I'm emphasizing the importance of ancient period before Common Era. Of all the 83 stars, we have found out if they were visible in these seasons, let us say minus 2,500. And we have gone up to minus 250 to find out when the error was minimum. There is a minimum error analysis, which is a modern scientific approach, which take wherever data is there, we do it. We collected enormous amount of data from modern softwares, because the modern equivalent names we could assign for these, because the texts have given the shape, the number of stars and all that. And you see that the minimum is somewhere around 1300 BC to 1100 BC. So this is the period in which you can clearly say Parashara and Vruddhagarga, maybe about plus or minus 50-100 years, they were living in this generation. So the Vedanga Jyotisha of Parashara, because it is strictly observational, would have started somewhere here. And what people call 1400 for Vedanga Jyotisha of Lagada. But Lagada is purely calendar. He would have come into picture only after the observations had taken place. Otherwise, he could not have given his arithmetical calculations at all. And there is a sequence here also you would see. And what is more important, the Vruddhagarga Jyotisha has one more chapter called Ritu Swabhava. that is the 59th section. Whereas the Aditya Chara is the 11th Anga, this is the 59th Anga. So if you presume that the ancient text was preserved by somebody, and then the later generations added something, so which is a possibility, and what would be the date for the Ritu Swabhava was our question. That also we could date. The minimum error occurs around minus 500, minus 400 BC. So there is a period of about 700 years which we can clearly discriminate in this Vriddhagargya Jyotisha, which is about 1300 to about 600 or 500 BC. What it means, the conclusion is the following, that this text is extremely, extremely important, and that should be studied, understood, published, not only for the archaeoastronomy, because you can date them. There are two different dates here. So the Aditya Chara, the Ritu Swabhavas, those shlokas, those observations were done roughly around 500 BC. Whereas even if they simply wrote the same thing later on, say in 1500 AD, the culture remembered something which happened in 1500 BC. That is the middle of the second millennium. So you can see the enormous amount of difference which happens. This makes a case that the Indian culture may be remembering something which is even earlier than 1500 BC. Yes, it does. I can't go into that detail because the Shishumara description in the Taittiriya Aranyaka, which is the Vedic description, which says the Dhruva is in a constellation called Shishumara, where there are 14 stars, that can be shown to belong to 3000 BC. I can't go into that detail here. I'm considering only the scientific test, not the hardcore Vedic test. This has been published just very pretty recently. Next, the Vriddhagargya Jyotisha also has a very long chapter on comets. So let us be thankful to Vriddhagargya because he repeats all the Parashara comets in verse form. It's not in prose form, but in verse form. And the time intervals are same, the names are same except for one or two. So it is kind of, I'm getting two people who are separated maybe by 2 or 3 generations who remembered that. And what is more, he gives a 27th comet, whereas Parashara gave only 26. He says there is one more comet called Gada Ketu, which rises in some details he has given. In other words, there would have been a tradition of observing comets and listing them when they occurred after the previous comet. This is a very important thing. He gives Margashirshyam Amavasyam Gada Ketu Pradarshate Aditya Raudra Sarpani Barhaspatyan Tataivacha. This means this touches Aditya, that is Hasta Nakshatra, Raudra, that is the Ardra Nakshatra, Sarpa, that is the Ashlesha, and Barhaspatya, that is the Pushya or the Tishya. Then Koshtagara, that is the Magha. All this it touches, then it goes out and says it's called Gada Ketu. Most probably this matches with a Halley's comet which occurred somewhere around 430 BC or so. And both the people say the cometary lore is Vedanga. The shloka is here. Nakshatra Chatram Akashe Yathaiva Parivartate Ketu Chakram Tatai Vedam Akashat Parivartate. Says they knew that comets, there are many, there are 101 comets, and they also come repeatedly. Somebody says it is the same comet which comes again and again. Somebody says, no, there are different comets which come at different periods. In any case, Vedartaniva Yatnena Prasanna Manasodhyataha Loka Sandarshanam Kuryuhu Ketunam Darshanadita. So he says the Ketu should be observed like and to be understood like you understand Veda. And in fact, this says this is the Vedanga. This Ketu Mala is actually a Vedanga. And that is once again in the Mahasalila also it is mentioned. So this is the 24th Anga is called Mahasalila, which is in prose. And we are planning to bring this out in a book form because it's a very long one, almost like one of the Vedic Brahmana texts. there is the first chapter, there are about 100 questions. There are people who say, I have heard, say that Indians lack this questioning attitude. They would simply agree whatever their teacher said, and they would say everything is Yogijanya Pratyaksha, and they would simply accept whatever Palajyotisha is given and all that. And there are also books which says you should not question these things, should simply accept it. That is unfortunately wrong, which slowly I think the modern generation would change this. And you see that maybe in Palajyotisha it was like that. There is no Palajyotisha, there is no Hora, there is no horoscope, or there is no Rashi before Common Era in these texts. And they would all say you have to ask questions. The students ask 100 questions to Vriddhagarda. And all the 100 questions, more or less, are answered in another chapter, which is also in prose form. I will not go into that, but the language is very tough. And we are trying to edit it. Surprisingly, it says Vedoktanam Grahayam Ashtashatam Sankhyaite. Tatra Ekashatam Ketunam Patyate Somarko Panchacha Taragraha Tasmad Ashtashata Sankhyaite. There are 108 grahas. They are the Vedoktas. And there are 101 Ketu, Soma, Arka, and 5 Taragraha. Panchataragraha is a word which is used even to this day, even in the Siddhantic astronomy. And you know the Navagrahas are there. These are the 5. Then we have these are the 7. Then the 8 is Rahu. And the 9th is Ketu. That is how it is taken. But Ketu is not the descending node, as it is unfortunately believed by many. But it is the comet. Now, I can't go into all this. He gives the names of the 5 planets and also gives how bright they are and what is their magnitude, or we can say the diameter of this. I will not read this because it's very interesting. The Rashmis are given. The name is Shukra, Brahaspati, Angarika, Kritika. Also for the Nakshatras, it's a list here. Identification is the modern identification. Shukra is Venus, Brahaspati is Jupiter. Now, Parimana, that is Yojanas are given. We'll not go into this. But magnitude, the modern magnitude is given. And the Rashmis are given. That is how many rays they are having. Now, that table is here. I hope you are able to see this. The Rashmi numbers, Surya has 1000 Rashmi, Chandra has 100, Shukra has 16, Brahaspati is 12, Angarika is 9, Shani is 5, Buddha is 7. A very interesting thing. Even we know that Buddha is, actually brighter than Shani. So the modern magnitude for Buddha is -2. Shani is only 0.9. No, negative magnitude means brighter. So the modern magnitudes, which is a logarithmic scale, for Sun it is -25 or 26, Chandra is -12. What we did was to plot this as a diagram, semi-log scale, because the modern magnitude is semi-log. Plotted Rashmi versus magnitude. And you can see there is a strong correlation between these dots refer to the Vriddhagarga Mahasalila Rashmi statement. And this red line is about the modern data which is available, the magnitude. You can see it's a very close correlation between the two. And there is also another observation about moon in the Mahasalila, which says there should have been only 5 tithis originally. That means a notation. 15 number would have been there in a paksha. And surprisingly, Brihad Samhita quotes this. Nanda Bhadra Vijaya Rikta Purnachatas Trivida. If you see the Tithi Adhyaya, Tithi Karma Guna Adhyaya, he says there are 3 tithis which rotate three times. I'm sorry, there are 5 tithis which rotate 3 times. So why it was like that? And we constructed a brightness diagram for moon, and you can see from 100% brightness, that is during Purnima, Amavasya it goes to 0. It is not a linear variation. It is actually a kind of a sinusoidal part of a sinusoid. The first 5 days, the reduction is rather small. Then suddenly from 5 to 11, it falls down very fast. It's about 20% here. This is about 60% reduction in between. Then again, it slowly goes to zero, another 20%. These are the three groups they recognized, and that's how they gave the names. 5 names are given, and these 5 names repeat 3 times. And these are some of the interesting things which we get. And the more important thing, I'm coming to my conclusion, I will not bother you too much. Vriddhagarga encourages both observation and mathematics. He says, particularly in the Chandramana chapter, there are 7 chapters for Chandramana. Whereas Parashara didn't give any of these kinds of things. He went to Surya directly. Vriddhagarga gives very detailed about Chandramana, Nakshatra, Rahu, then Brihaspati, each chapter. In about 1,100 verses, these are covered, the planets, the celestials are covered. The remaining 5,000 verses are different. Now, he says, Nahi sarvatra ganitam, nahi sarvatra darshanam. Darshanam ganitam chaiva yugapad yoga sadhakam. A very important thing is the manuscript thing I have underlined here, because the nakshatras, the modern concept is totally different. Modern Indian concept, I would say. It is the birth nakshatra, but Chandra has to be with that particular nakshatra. That is what is called birth nakshatra. That is the natal star. But in the morning, how do you know which nakshatra it was? So he says, he gives also the time that that moon spends with each nakshatra. And if it is not visible, he says, Darshanam Ganitan Chaiva Yugapad Yoga Sadhaka. We have to use Ganita also there. Yesham Akaranam Chakshu Rakshanam Alpachetasa. If you don't do these two, Tesham Akaranam Sarvam Yad Vaidyasya Ati Kanchana. It is like giving simply money to a doctor who doesn't cure you. If you don't, you go to a Jyotishi who doesn't know both observation and calculations. That is what he says. It's a very interesting book. This is how arithmetic started, or interpolation started. That Ganita is only a linear interpolation because Trairashika. And whatever Lagada gives is mainly Trairashika, nothing else. He has considered all the past information, but he took each nakshatra to be of equal distance of 13.5 days. So this has developed over time, and this is my summary and conclusion. The starting date of the school of Parashara and Vriddhagarga, as I have shown, can be by archaeoastronomy shown to be this very clearly, not just the winter solstice, and then, a lot of arguments, because Vedanga Jyotisha also, in one shloka, it says about Meena Rashi. So Meena Rashi names, Rashi word is Sanskrit, but this Mesha, Vrishubha, Meena came very late. It is not there in the older text, nor in the Vedas. So many of the Western, historians of science, they have said that Lagada's Vedanga Jyotisha may belong to only 400 BC. Reason is, if you accept that, then the Tithi concept also would have been very late. Because in the hardcore Veda, you don't see the word Tithi. But the concept of Tithi has come already around 1300 BC, as I showed in the Mahasaliladhyaya. By observing the moon, they found out, depending on the moon's reduction in size or light or magnitude, there is some changes which occur even on the ground. I can't go into the mystical and other issues, because all these observations are rooted in the Vedic concept, Dyauh Pita Matha Prithvi. So what happens in Prithvi? What happens to moon on Amavasya day? What is Soma? The Soma, does it come onto the ground? And Amavasya day, does he stay with, the Soma stays with cows and going to be in the holy tirthas? These are the questions which come up later. That's also covered in Vriddhagargiya Jyotisha to some extent. But the astronomy was because of this. Now, PT and VGJ, Parashar Tantra and Vriddhagargiya Jyotisha, they contain the most ancient observational astronomical, including the comets. Let us be very clear on that. So the solar zodiac, solar I say because it was the sun. They understood that it is the sun who causes the seasons. There are only 6 seasons. That was, of course, known even from the Vedic period. There are mantras which talk about rainfall and the seasons. and the sun. Then it was the winter solstice was taken as the 0 point, because that is going to be easily visible, that you can observe that it is the southernmost point of sun. That is the winter solstice. There can be 1 or 2 days error in that. So observational errors are always possible. So this is unlike the later 12 Rashi zodiac. If you see the Siddhantic astronomy, they will say the Ritus are starting from which Rashi to which Rashi. So Mesha, Vrishabha will be Vasanta, like that it comes. Here it is not like that. So VGJ is an improvement on the Parashara Tantra. Vriddhagarga encourages computations, as I already showed. So VGJ also describes 26 comets of PT, Parashara Tantra, in better details. He gives more details on this. That is why it is important for us. So the position of sun, I have already mentioned about it, will not read it. Let us remember, there are no 12 Rashi statements for indicating seasons as in later texts, either in Parashara Tantra or in the Vriddhagargya Jyotisha. Even though planets were known, sun, moon, eclipses, stars, comets, occultations, and anomalies get abundantly described. Anomaly means it is kind of, for rainfall, we say that it is above normal, below normal, there may be heavy rainfall. Some normal is assumed and above and below is discussed, which is a statistical concept. It is the same thing is done. And between the Vedic period and the period of Parashara and Vriddhagarga, the concept of time, there was a great leap. The position of the sun with respect to the background nakshatras are given for 6 equal divisions of Ritus of the year. What is the concept? The time spent on earth in one Ritu equals the time taken by sun to cover 4.5 nakshatra space in the sky. So these two, they try to connect what happens in the sky, because the time can be measured only by movement of celestial objects. That is the fundamental thing. The Maitrayani Upanishad and others discuss in greater detail, Suryo Yoni Kalasya and all that. Can't go into that. That is why it says Kalam Brahmet Upasita also it says. It is as good as telling Surya also, you can take it as Brahma. Now they gave the same definition of Ritu for moon also. When moon covers 4.5 nakshatra, it is a lunar Ritu. Now people have mistaken this, because this comes also in Lagada Jyotisha. They said why the Ritu is not by moon. The word Ritu is a technical word, is not just the felt Ritu. Because in the older Vedic text, it was the felt Ritu. Because in some places it says there are 5 Ritus, some places there are 6 Ritus, some it says 7 Ritus are also possible. So that Ritu is different, it is felt. Whereas here they made it observational. You see at the sky, 4.5 nakshatra sun covers, then it is 1 Ritu. So there are 6 Ritus to make a year. This got further refined, bringing in mathematics. That's a different matter. But this was the foundation for later astronomy. And this included, let us remember, stars, particularly Agastya. They wanted to know the time, because Agastya was not along the ecliptic. He was not one of the nakshatras. He was in the south. And his rise and set they wanted to understand. And long before Dhruva had vanished, there was no pole star during this period, during Parashara's period and during Vriddhagarga's period. So they don't talk about a fixed Dhruva at all. They will only mention a Dhruva Nakshatra, which they remember, which in modern time we call it Thuban or Alpha Draconis, not the modern Alpha Polaris. Let us understand that. Today the pole star is in Ursa Minor, and Alpha Ursa Minor is the present day pole star. But in 3000 BC, the pole star, northern pole star, was really our ancient Dhruva. That was in the Draco constellation, which you can observe, but it has shifted by so many degrees. So these people don't talk about a fixed Dhruva. We have to appreciate that also. They were observational, strictly observational. So for tracing the history of Indian astronomy before Aryabhata, Parashara Tantra and Vridagarga Jyotish are indispensable. People talk about history of astronomy and mathematics, but history of astronomy is closely connected, of course, with mathematics. And unless we go back before BCE period, even the history of mathematics in this country cannot be understood. People talk about zero and so many other things, but how did that concept come up? That you can see in these texts. The ideas are there, but the words come up slowly. So historical development, if you are interested, these are the primary Vedanga Jyotisha texts, so important for our culture. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping.
Yes.
If there are questions, I can answer. Otherwise, thank you.
Yeah.
I took about 10-15 minutes extra. Sorry for that.
Yeah. If you have any questions, you can please type it in your chat box. So I think no more questions, sir.
Okay.
We are overwhelmed with your immense, extraordinary knowledge in this field.
Well, that's okay. But
We are thankful.
If the listeners and audience, the youngsters particularly, people who are knowledgeable, particularly in Sanskrit also, they take interest in this and work further, I would be happy.
I'm sure the students who are present here are inspired by this, and they will work in this direction to promote Indian knowledge system in such fashion.
Yeah, I know you are you are leading that group. I'm sure you would give a push to that. I'm sure about that.
Thank you very much, sir. इसके बाद एक हम समाप्ति की ओर चलते हैं. हमारे साथ रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट के प्रोफेसर निखिल दामले जो रजिस्ट्रार है वो उपस्थित है. उसके पहले आई वुड लाइक टू गिव I'm happy to announce that Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management has been accredited with A+ grade now by NAC yesterday only. So this is a great news for us. And I would like to request Professor Nikhil Damle, the Registrar of College, to kindly address the gathering.
ओम नमः शिवाय. नमस्कार. आज महाशिवरात्रि का पर्व है और इस पर्व पर हम इस विज्ञान दिवस का आयोजन एक अपने आप में एक वैशिष्ट्यपूर्ण आयोजन है. हम सभी जानते हैं कि रामदेव बाबा अभियांत्रिकी एवं प्रबंधन महाविद्यालय एक इंजीनियरिंग एजुकेशन प्रोवाइडिंग इंस्टीट्यूशन है जो इंजीनियरिंग प्रोग्राम में शिक्षा प्रदान करता है. आज का आयोजन हमने जगत गुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च के साथ किया है, which will prove an important step in re-establishing the importance of science, which is deeply rooted in the Bharatiya Jeevancharya. We at RCOM are associated in the mission of propagating the Indian knowledge through Sanskrit text through our project Pradnya Kendra, which is a center to promote non-formal Sanskrit education among engineers and students. Sri Iyengar's Jnanpurna Vivechan on natural science and Sanskrit texts will also be motivating factor in taking new projects in Indian knowledge system through study of Sanskrit, which we assure you, sir, that the Pradnya Kendra will look forward to it, and in association with Jagat Guru Sri Devnath Institute of Vedic Science and Research will be able to give some important breakthrough discoveries in the Indian knowledge system. I once again thank you on behalf of Sri Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management for this auspicious organization and for this knowledgeful talk. Thank you, sir.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद दामले सर. हम समाप्ति की ओर चलते हैं. आभार प्रदर्शन व्यक्त करेंगे सर्वप्रथम प्रोफेसर RN अयंगर जी जो हमारे साथ इस मंथन में उपस्थित थे और जिन्होंने इतना अद्भुत ऐसे जो अपना ज्ञान है उसका प्रदर्शन किया। मैं उनका बहुत बहुत आभारी हूँ। प्रोफेसर निखिल दामले जो रजिस्ट्रार है रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट के, मैं आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। आपने अपना अमूल्य समय देके आप यहाँ पे उपस्थित रहे। डॉक्टर भारचंद्र हरदास जो रामदेव बाबा कॉलेज ऑफ इंजीनियरिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट के प्रोफेसर हैं, मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद अर्पण करता हूँ। आचार्य श्रेयस कुरेकर जी जो जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च के हेड ऑफ द डिपार्टमेंट है इन वेदास, और जिन्होंने प्रारंभ में जिन्होंने मंत्र पाठ किया और उनकी वाणी से हमें मंत्रमुग्ध किया, मैं आपका भी बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। सुमेध पाठक जो हमारे टेक्निकल टीम हेड है, उनका मैं बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। और लास्ट बट नॉट द लीस्ट सारे स्टूडेंट्स, scholars, researchers, technicians, principals, and all the stakeholders of this Indian Knowledge System division, Indian Knowledge systems who are there for promoting the Indian knowledge system. I thank you all for this. And last but not the least, we are in process of organizing such webinars in coming years. एक और चीज मैं आप सबको बताना चाहता हूँ कि जगतगुरु श्री देवनाथ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वैदिक साइंस एंड रिसर्च नागपुर ने इंदिरा गांधी नेशनल सेंटर फॉर आर्ट्स दिल्ली जो कल्चरल मिनिस्ट्री के अंडर है, उनके साथ एसोसिएशन में एक वेबिनार सीरीज हम ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं आने वाले वर्ष में। तो आप सभी आमंत्रित है। आप सभी को पता चल जाएगा कि आर्ट्स एंड क्राफ्ट्स इस थीम पे हम हमारा अगला वेबिनार लेने वाले हैं। तो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। यहाँ पे इस कार्यक्रम संपन्न हुआ ऐसा मैं घोषित करता हूँ। धन्यवाद।